Hi, it's time for a quick, short, detailed chime video. So this is a NuTone K40, and this particular K40 was made in, wait for it, 1947. And it's actually fairly rare that there's any kind of date code on a NuTone chime, but this one does have one. When this came into me, it was in pretty raggedy shape. It didn't work at all. It was obvious to me that someone had worked on it in the past, and anything they did to it didn't really help. And so I've been working on trying to get it back into good working condition. And while it now functions again, it doesn't really sound the way that I want it to sound. And part of the reason has to do with the way the tone bars are attached to the resonating tubes. This side I think I have sorted out. This side is yet to be done. So I've got it unscrewed. The only way you can really work on these are you have to take the resonator tube and tone bar assemblies off the chime base, and you do that by removing the screws or the nuts on the back of the screws to lift them off. And I'm pretty sure that's the way it was probably made when it was new. So I've got this detached so we can lift this out, and let me move the chime base out of the way because this is what we're going to talk about. There is a real difference between any NuTone chime made before 1950 and chimes made before that. And sort of without looking up all the dates and being specifically accurate about it, NuTone started making door chimes in 1936, give or take. And so you have 1936 up until the beginning of World War II, which we'll just say was beginning of 1942. NuTone did war production during the war, and I'm actually going to make a video about that. And then after the end of World War II, they slowly, I assume, began making door chimes again, and materials I think were hard to get. They didn't really have any newer designs, not completely new designs. Chimes they made right after World War II were very much like the chimes that they made before the war, because that's what they had available. I'm guessing that they had leftover parts and things that they stored and kept during the war, and then starting around 1950 there were newer, more updated designs. So this is a post-war chime, but it's a pre-war design. And like I said, they are entirely different chimes. They don't bear a lot of resemblance, but while some of the models continued on, the engineering, the way they're put together is very different. When this chime came into me, the way the tone bars had been attached, because somebody had worked on it, somebody put on a bunch of really thick, heavy, rubbery grommets. And these are not original grommets because, one, most NuTone chimes pre-war, immediately following post-war chimes, they didn't use grommets. Maybe some did, but for the most part they didn't. And these are obviously modern synthetic grommets. And grommets, I've talked about grommets in a lot of chime videos. Grommets are very complicated, and to find grommets that are exactly the right type in today's time compared to what they were back in the late 40s and early 50s is a really tricky thing to do. But these are completely wrong. These are too large, they're too heavy, and they held the tone bars very solidly onto the resonators, and that's not what you want. What you need is, you need a certain amount of floppiness in the way it's held in place. It has to be held on securely, but it has to have enough floppiness, enough flexibility, so when the plunger strikes it, it makes the proper tone. When you have something like this where it's held too tightly, when the plunger hits the tone bar, all it really does is it goes thunk. And it may be a different thunk for each tone bar because each one's a different note, but it's obviously wrong. So these don't work. These were no good at all. I know for a fact that the way these tone bars were originally attached were completely different. And let me show you why I know that. This is another K40. It's not actually a K40, but it's basically a K40. We're not going to get into that because that's not what this video is going to be about. But as you can see, it's essentially the same chime base. Slightly different application, but it's basically the same. Fortunately, on this one, we also have a date code. It's 1948. So they are from the same period. They have the same brass tone bars, and no, these are not steel. These are actual solid brass tone bars. And if you look really carefully, you can see how the tone bars are attached. So in this close-up shot, you can see here's the tone bar. See, listen. Sounds pretty good, huh? And if you look right here, you can see this black piece right here. And there's another one up here. And these aren't actually original either. These actually, someone made these, because you can tell it looks like they cut them out with a pair of scissors. But on the back side, possibly are original ones. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe more on that one. What these were originally were fiber washers. And fiber washers, they're not really made out of cardboard so much. I'm not sure exactly what fiber washers are made out of, but we now have a wide assortment of different kinds of fiber washers here at the shop. Whole bunch of different kinds. Oh, there goes one bag. And these I special ordered from a company to try to come up with the right size. Of course, it's hard to know precisely what size the openings in them should be, so you sort of best guess, you measure, you figure it out, and then you order a couple that size, couple sets slightly larger, couple sets slightly smaller, because they're not expensive, so you might as well order a whole bunch. And that's the fiber washers are what keep the tone bars from falling off the little posts on the resonators. The other key part to this is something on the other side. So this is this post, and this post would have the short tone bar that goes across it. And if you look really carefully, you can see right here, see it slide back and forth? There's this little sleeve that fits around the post. I'm not sure what it's made out of. It's somewhat compliant. If you push it lightly, it sort of squishes. And this fits through the hole in the tone bar like this. Tone bar fits, it's a little hard to squeeze it in here, but the tone bar fits around the little plastic sleeve. And the purpose of the sleeve is to insulate the metal tone bar from the metal post, because without that insulating quality, when the plunger hits the tone bar, you end up getting what NuTone used to refer as that jangly sound, because you've got metal vibrating on metal and it sounds all weird, and that's not the way it's supposed to sound. So the little metal sleeve is an integral part of the design. And on this one, this all came loose like this. This is the way I found this one. So there would be a fiber washer on the back side, then you have the sleeve, then the tone bar goes on, then there's another fiber washer that pops over the end of the post, and that's what holds it in place. That's the way a lot of NuTone chimes were assembled up until around 1950, when grommets became all the thing. If it was good enough for them, that's good enough for me. The challenge is, the fiber washer thing wasn't that hard, because like I say, you just order a whole bunch of different sizes that seem relatively close to what you need, and then you figure out which ones work the best, and fiber washers are inexpensive, so that's simple. The little sleeve thing, that's trickier, because there isn't any giant online store of little plastic sleeves are us, and you can just order a whole bunch of them. And I'm not even sure how this got over the head of the post, because of the head of the post is kind of mushroom shaped, and this is obviously just large enough to slide back and forth on the post, which is considerably a smaller diameter. It may be that this was, when this was brand new, this was stretchy enough that you could stretch it over the top of the post, but I think now if I tried to remove it, it would just tear, and then it would be wrecked, and we don't want to do that, although I'm faced with that problem because on all of the other tone bars around the chime, all of the washers probably need to be replaced. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. My job on the first one is to figure out how to duplicate this type of idea with what's available today. So now this is our raggedy K40 tone bar assembly that you saw in the first part of the video. And let's go ahead and take this off. Now I have worked on this some in trying to come up with the best way to do this. The black fiber washers are actually new. And if let me zoom out a little. If I kind of carefully pull up on these, of course this is in completely the wrong orientation to make this easy. So you can see the fiber washer, and it's pushed over the end of the post, and if I sort of angle the tone bar and pull up, it pops off, and if you listen carefully you can kind of hear it go pop as it comes off. So they do fit on fairly securely. And then here's a larger diameter fiber washer on the back, and that so the tone bar rests up against it, and that seemed like the right way to go. I suppose they could all be the same size, but to me it seemed like the larger one was better. This post right here is a little loose, so we'll screw that down. Now, what I did, these didn't have any of the little rubber sleeves on them at all. They were just bare metal, and then they had the big giant heavy-duty grommets, which were totally wrong. Because you can see if I put this on here, it's an effort to push it down, and it's like totally tight and wrong. So and there's no floppiness in the tone bar by using these. And these are also really hard to get off. These are much, much too stiff for anything to use in a door chime. So what I started off with here was, and you might be able to see, you can't see the shiny brass post because right now it has a piece of heat shrink tubing put around it and then shrunk down to grab onto it. When I tried this the first time, so I put the red fiber washer, then I put this, and I put the black fiber washer, and then I put the chime together to ring it, it gave me a fairly good note, but not as good as I wanted it to be. And also, in comparing this to the other 1948 chime, the amount of floppiness like this and like this was too much. And this is the only way, there's no index of NuTone Chime tone bar floppiness scale. You sort of have to judge it by one that seems reasonably original, and also one that when it rings, it actually sounds right. Because that's really the key to all of these. The chimes are all about what they sound like. So I tried one piece of heat shrink tubing. That's not quite enough. Then I actually measured the diameter of the sleeve on the 1948 K40 chime, and it measures out at about 6 millimeters in diameter. What I did on the second one is we're going to put a second piece of heat shrink tubing around the first piece and then try again. Now, one of the things you have to take into account is you have to be able to put this washer on. When you do the second piece of heat shrink tubing, it has to be a little bit shorter than the first piece, otherwise you won't be able to push the washer on. And when we put the second piece on, you have to put the washer in place first. So that seems to work out all right because I did that on the first assembly. So let me go ahead and mark these, and we're going to cut them and shrink them, and then we'll try it out and we'll have to do the other one too, and then we'll put it together and see what it sounds like. And I will try to keep my big hands out of the way. The way I found that was the easiest to do this is you could measure it and do all of that, but that makes it really difficult. The easiest way to do it is you put the red fiber washer on, you take your heat shrink tubing and you sit it on the fiber washer, and of course this is really, really hard to do in trying to keep your hands out of the way so you all can see. So what you're going to do is you're just going to sit it on there, and you're going to take your marker and you're going to make a little mark, because that makes it easier. Of course, if you drop it, then you can't find the end with the mark on it, so it's right there. And now that you saw me do one, I'm going to do the other one with my hand in the way. Like that. Once you've done that, then you just use a pair of scissors and you cut them. And if this method works out, what I'll end up doing at the end is making a whole bunch of these at one time, so they're all the same. And I'll probably come up with a way to cut them to a uniform length without having to hold it up against the thing every time and mark it. And then I'll make like 100 of them. And that way I'll have them when I need them, and that just makes life easier. So now we're going to shrink it. I have to wait for the hot air gun to heat up here for a second. And the nice thing about this is when you put the heat shrink, the second layer on, and shrink it down, it also bonds itself to the first layer, so it becomes like one thick piece, which is pretty good. Now, the thing that I think is right. Get them out here and make sure, just to keep everybody honest. We'll get our caliper out, and it should be the caliper. Invaluable tool when you're working on really small things and you have to be reasonably precise. We're going to set this to 6 millimeters. That's pretty close. See, 6.02, close enough. And if I take this and I slide it around, we're pretty close. So that's pretty close. So I think we're in the ballpark anyway. Because if we're in the ballpark, then we'll have the right level of floppiness. So once we've done that, we'll put our tone bar back on. And see, let's put the grommets on. So we'll use the black fiber washers, no grommets, fiber washers. They go on the outside. And the best way I found to put these on is, this is a 1/4 inch nut driver, and you sort of tilt it to get part way on, and then you put it over it and you push, and it pops it through. And surprisingly enough, maybe or not, maybe in the world of fiber washers, these actually hold on really well. It takes a fair amount of effort to push them on and a fair amount of effort to get them off. So I don't think there's much risk of the tone bar actually falling off at any point. Because, you know, if it was good enough for NuTone in the 1940s, I think it's good enough for us. So if we take this and we go side to side, like this, or end to end, you can see it move. And I'm just trying to move it laterally. But if we do this one, which only has one layer of heat shrink tubing, it moves quite a bit more. And also this one, for floppiness, there's that one, and this one, a lot more. And the thing that I don't know if you can tell or not, probably not, is when I do it, move this one and check the floppiness ratio, this one not only moves a lot, but it moves a lot more freely than this one does. I think this probably will be successful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop, I'm going to finish this one, then we're going to put this back in the K40 chime, and then we're going to ring it. And even though you didn't get to hear it before, I heard it a lot, so I know, and then we'll see if we made an improvement or not. So I put the resonating tube back on the base. This is the side you watched me do the first tone bar of. This side was already done. And I've got it wired up. It's sort of jury-rigged a little bit because it's just for testing right now. I don't have it on a button and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't really make any difference. If we ring the rear door, which is a single note, which is this solenoid and this tone bar, it sounds much better and a better, clearer tone than what it did when it only had the one layer of heat shrink tubing. Now we'll ring the 8-note chime. And that sounds much better also. All of the notes are much clearer and cleaner, or whatever it is music people say about notes, I don't really know. But it sounds dramatically different than what it sounded like before. So I think the 2 layers of the heat shrink tubing gives us the proper amount of original floppiness on the tone bars. Now this sounds 100% better than it did when it only had the 1 layer on it. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up. Thumbs up on YouTube, because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.